Good morning, everyone. DMGeezerjim here again today. Going to continue our Dungeon Mastering Basics to DMing series. Episode 11. Before I go too far in, thank you for joining me. If you guys have questions, comments, concerns, or anything, please post them in the comments. I check them regularly, and I'd be more than happy to engage in, in any discussions if there's any questions. Also, I don't live in an echo chamber. If you agree or disagree with anything, feel free to drop it in. I'd love to have the discussion. We only learn from each other when we engage with each other. So, also, if there's anything really specific, like I said a couple times in these videos, this is episode 11. I've tried to break it down into segmented information. Each episode is really focused on one thing. Obviously, dungeon mastering involves knowing and using all of these pieces at the same time. So there may be some subjects that I might have either not gone into enough depth on, or you want some more information on as a viewer. Please feel free to put a comment in there. If I can't handle it directly through comment, I'll make another video. So yeah, episode 11, DMGeezerjim's Guide to Being a Dungeon Master, to Dungeon Mastering, learning how to do it. We're going to talk about adventure hooks today, okay? Kind of one of the bigger parts of getting your story going, or even moving your party from point A to point B. As I'd stated last episode, for the preparation section, we will all be using the Lost Mines of Phandelver. This is freely available on Dungeons & Dragons D&D Beyond. It's a giveaway by Wizards of the Coast. The main reason I'm using that, not because it's like the best adventure ever, but because it's a common point of entry. Something that all of us will have access to, and something that we can all share the visuals for, share the information for. There's nothing stopping you from having access to any of the information I've given you in this series so far. You need basic rules. It wouldn't hurt to have the Dungeon Master Guide and the Player's Handbook. That's really it. Outside of that, and access to the Lost Mines of Phandelver, those are the only materials, in my opinion, that you need to learn how to become a DM and put it into practice. Okay, so Lost Mines of Phandelver, here we come. We are talking about adventure hooks. Before I go too far, if you're a new Dungeon Master or a new player, that's your hook. We want to play D&D. I'm telling you, day 1 Dungeon Master, session 2 Dungeon Master, session 3 Dungeon Master, don't stress yourself out over an adventure hook as far as why are we going into this campaign, why are we doing this. The joy of playing Dungeons & Dragons is enough to begin with, so don't put the extra pressure on you by trying to come up with a Lord of the Rings-esque plot line on day 1. Adventure hooks that's not necessarily the representation of an adventure hook. The term adventure hook is exactly what it says. What are we using to getting our players, what do we use to get our players involved? What is the plot thing? What is the quest marker? What is the why? Why are our players getting involved in this adventure? Again, like I said, I want to stress from a holistic standpoint, from a beginner standpoint, the joy of playing D&D is enough. Don't get stressed out in that. But at the same time, it is definitely a skill and a mechanism that you're going to need to recognize and practice and eventually master to keep your adventures moving. The adventure hook is the why. Why is our party doing this? Why are our players doing this? So I'm going to flip over to D&D Beyond here. This is a wall of text. I do apologize. It is what it is. But I'm not going to read this whole thing to you directly in this video. But it is a pretty good layout that's telling you as the Dungeon Master about the basic setting of your world. The setting itself can provide a hook. The setting for an adventure, for example, the Out of the Abyss adventure, you're starting out naked and afraid in a dungeon. The hook is to get out. There is no major overriding plot on day 1 other than escape. That's an adventure hook based on a setting. The Phandelver is a kind of a generic sandbox sort of an adventure. So there isn't as much of a need to make our players go there. They can have their own reasons for visiting Phandalin, or you can use an adventure hook. They start out in Neverwinter, and a patron of theirs hires them to escort a wagon to Phandalin. That's the hook. It's nice and simple. Hey, level 1 people, can I give you a bag of gold to take this stuff over to this town? That is your hook. That is as simple as it is to start the Lost Mines. And in many cases, that's as simple as you really need to have. You just need to get them out the door. Give them their reason why. As we continue in this series, I'll talk a little bit more about world building and setting, making sure that you're putting effort into the setting, the environment, and the descriptions, because a lot of times the players will find their own hooks if you have a well-developed world. That's not day 1 stuff, that's day 50 stuff. Don't stress on that. You just need to have enough to get your party going. And then when they get to the next place, enough to get them motivated. So the adventure hook, as it's written here and forgotten right here, it's nice and simple. Meet me in Phandelver. That gets them on the road. The next chapter leads them to the Goblin Ambush. I'm not going to go into encounter. We'll talk about combat tactics directly in a different episode. If you're unfamiliar with combat at all, check out my video series. I did a full hour-long breakdown of how to manage combat on a virtual tabletop, including line of sight, all of that kind of stuff. So if you haven't ran a combat before, yeah, go check out that episode. It'll probably be pretty informative for you. But the first encounter is with a bunch of goblins. Goblin ambush. Goblins shoot at the party. One of them gets away. Worst case scenario, they kill all the goblins. They can see the goblins have taken something along a trail into the woods. That's your next hook. It's not a plot device. It's a plot device, but it's not something that's like a major dialogue-driven thing. An adventure hook is what's going to move them to the next spot. So in this case, part 1, Goblin Arrows. The ambush itself is the next step, the next setup. And you're going to see this kind of play itself out over and over. A well-constructed adventure doesn't necessarily need you as a dungeon master to create the hooks. The motivation for the adventure, the plot itself, is enough. So, I know there's a lot of media out there, a lot of, Twitter talk and Reddit threads and Facebook posts about adventure hooks. I think there's something that they're necessary, but if you're running your game well, the adventure hooks, the adventurers find their own hooks most of the time. We're just littering things around there. Like I said, the appearance that it looks like, and for the second part of this, getting the party from the ambush to the hideout, okay, the Crag Mall hideout, which, again, we talked about that last episode when we were doing map keys, how to understand a map, how to read it, how to index it into combat. So the party's supposed to come here for the next thing. We want our party to come here, ideally. So maybe you just describe the drag marks as it looks like 2 heels were drugged. There's 2 furrows, parallel furrows dug into the path as if someone was dragging a body behind them. That should be enough of a hook for them to go, oh shit, we should go see. There was no blood, there's no nothing. There's just those drag marks for the body, right? So that's your next hook, right out the gate, boom. Looks like they took a prisoner, we should go, okay? When you get into Cragmaw itself, there are 2 other hooks that are presented in the adventure. One of them is the small goblin at room 6 wants to be in charge. So he makes a deal, if you can kill the bugbear in room 8, I'll give you the prisoner and we'll let you go in peace. Another adventure hook, okay? Plot points are adventure hooks. Just the 2 terms are synonymous. A lot of times the thing you got to remember is not all plot points are apparent to your players. Some plot points need to be hidden. Some specific things they don't need to find out about until day 10, despite the fact that it's impacting your party on day 2. A plot point is always a hook, but let me rephrase that. A hook is always a plot point, but a plot point isn't necessarily an obvious hook. So that's the best way to describe that. So the hook here is what they find out when the party gets in and starts dealing with the goblins. They could go murder, hobo, crazy, kill everything, and no questions. You're like, oh gosh, I broke my game. No, because there's still a kidnapped dwarf that's being found here that will lead them to the next hook. Thank you for rescuing me. Take me to the town of Phandelver, and I can pay you. So on and so forth. Okay. So your next hook is presented as soon as they get the character. This is a very linear presentation of an adventure, because it's supposed to be. We're looking at a basic day 1 beginner set adventure module. So it needs to be constructed to support beginners, which means, yes, a lot of linear movement. The whole idea of a railroaded adventure comes in. I don't necessarily agree with that. In certain places, obviously, it is railroaded, and guess what? In every adventure, from your first adventure to your last campaign, there will be sections that are railroaded. So don't be so afraid of the idea that, oh, my party's going to get mad because they're on a railroad because they have to go from here to here to here to here for the next step. That's okay. Okay. Railroaded adventures, while we're talking about that, a railroaded adventure is one of those where you're basically, no matter what your party says or do, the next thing's going to happen. No matter who your party fights or kills, the next thing is guaranteed to happen. The fact a railroad adventure, in my opinion, is an adventure that is going to progress forward no matter what the players do, and it's only going to progress in one direction. Your players cannot impact the direction. Now, let me step back a second and say, yes, the first part, the Goblin ambush, the Cragmaw hideout, the rescue of Sildar, they all seem, it seems very linear. Your party can say no. If your party decides to walk past the Goblin ambush, leave the Cragmaw hideout in there, and move to Phandelver, you're going to need to come up with the next step for it. Maybe they get sent back to rescue Sildar. They didn't even know he was captured at that point, so they get to the town, and then you provide the information that, oh, you guys are supposed to be with that caravan, where is he, blah, 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 so they have to go back and rescue him. So we're still using the same hook, we're just presenting it at a different point in time. Your party has the illusion and the feeling, your players feel, and actually, I don't even say feel, they have exercised their player agency. They've moved forward. You've allowed them to move off of the chosen path, and you just simply redirect them later if it's necessary. Or you don't, or the guy dies, and it doesn't matter. They never rescue the non-player character. He dies in the cave, and the party just doesn't get to interact with that part of the story. Okay, so adventure hooks are plot points, but plot points aren't always adventure hooks. Okay, that's the first thing to understand. The second thing is going back to what you've probably heard me say a dozen times, and I'll continue saying a dozen times. Read the book. Read your adventure from beginning to end. If you're making up your own adventure from scratch, read it from beginning to end. Make sure that it makes sense. Look for any gaps that you might need to be ready to fill in on the spot. Look for any inconsistencies. Look for anything that you need to adjust to fit your players and your characters a little bit better versus what's been printed. Reading the module from beginning to end is key, making sure you understand how it begins, what's supposed to go on in the middle, and how it's supposed to be resolved. A dungeon master needs to be aware of all of that so we know where to put our hooks. If you're not sure what an important story beat is, then you're not going to be able to hook your players into that point. You'll be scrambling, you'll be improvising, or gasp, you'll have to railroad them because you're not prepared to move them in that direction. You now have to force them in that direction. Or you have to go completely off the rails and off script and build a completely new adventure from scratch, which does happen. But even then, that's because you put a hook unknowingly that took your party away from the direction that they're in. The concept of an adventure hook, everything has the potential to be an adventure hook. And early on as a dungeon master, be careful. If you have a strange dog run up to your party out of the fields off to the left of them as they're traveling down a road, and he's got a little tag on him and he's hopping and hip hop, your party's going to think, what's up with this dog? You may have just simply intended to have a friendly little puppy roll up on him and yip, 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 play with him a second ago, just for flavor, for content. Your party's going to probably see that as a hook. Who does this dog belong to? Why is this dog here? Is this dog a werewolf? Is this dog trying to eat us? Party's brains go out the window. So that's what I mean when I say an inadvertent hook. Sometimes the information we provide just for flavor, just for content, just to add some ambiance and to add some atmosphere to our world, your players can interpret that for a hook. A big raging thunderstorm out of nowhere, and the more dramatic you make it, the more your party thinks that it's something there. So be cautious with that. Well, no, don't be cautious. Be aware of that. There's nothing we can do. A dungeon master, we can't necessarily tell we don't want to tell our players, this is just flavor. This is just context. We want them to feel the danger, or make the second leap, the jump to a conclusion, shall we say, that even isn't necessarily there. Okay, so yeah, we'll continue into the Lost Mines book here real quick as we're going on. Phandalin itself. When you read through Phandalin as a dungeon master, you're going to understand there are three primary plot things that are going on here. The Stonehill Inn is the your typical tavern start. Even if your party doesn't, I know it's real quick. I'm going to rewind a second. We're going to talk a little bit of history here. The whole trope, the whole stereotype of our players meet in a tavern, our players meet in an inn. Let's remember the context of where we're playing. We're playing in a fantasy universe. There's no cell phones, there's no TV, there's no internet, there's no radios, there's none of that. The only way people share information in a larger city, you might have handbills. In a smaller town, it's getting together at the public house, the pub, and trading stories at the end of the night, trading stories at the end of the day, getting a fresh drink. It was literally the public house. The word pub derives from that. So before you as a dungeon master start stressing out, I don't want my guys to meet in a tavern. It's everyone meets in a tavern. Yes, they do, because that's part of society here. The tavern is the meeting hall of the common man. The tavern is where the deals are done. Where, if there's any communication that's not face to face, it's handwritten. Maybe if you're rich and fancy and have magic, you use sending stones and message. Waterdeep's got the flying birds, but outside of that, public houses, taverns, inns, bars, that is where the major socialization of a society takes place in our setting. So first and foremost, don't worry about that. Don't get all hung up on that, because you have history on your back. When your players go, why we always got to meet in a tavern? You look at them and say, where else are all of these farmers going to get together and talk about the wolves on the outskirts of the forest, or the hot new school marm that's moved into town, or the evil lord 2 towns over that's starting to send patrols and grabbing taxes out of stuff? Where else does common man talk about that? So yes, lean into using your inn, lean into using your taverns. There's nothing wrong with it, and it's fully supported by history, society, and everything else. Okay, teach your players something in that instance. Red Brand Ruffians is the next thing. Sooner or later, as the party's running around in Phandalin, they'll run into these thugs that are ostensibly in charge. That's another hook. So either A, back onto task here, we're looking at Phandalin, the town proper. The inn can be a source of your information. What's going on around here? Well, when your party walks into the inn and says, what's kicking around here? If you haven't read the book up to this point, you're SOL, right? Going back to read the manual before you start the game. Take notes before you run your adventure. That when they roll up in Stonehill Inn, you're ready to provide them with some of the information, some of the ups and downs and the goods and the bads of the town. Avoiding that, the next thing is the Red Brand Ruffians. This is the major plot point, is helping protect the town from the Red Brands. You can be very obvious about that. The Red Brands themselves could be checking people as they come into town, providing the hook here. Well, there ain't no nobles around here. There ain't no guards around here. We took it upon ourselves to protect this town, and to make sure that we're funded properly, we charge 5 silver pieces for everyone to enter the town. That's bullshit. You've got a hook right there. Put the Red Brands in a position where they have some semblance of power, whether legitimately or illegitimately, and then embellish it by having, one of the townsfolk walk by muttering bloody red bands and the Red Brand and the Red Band. Hey, watch your mouth, da da da. This is a situation where you're setting a hook, but you're not being obvious about it right at the front. Presenting the Red Brands as the bandits in charge of a town can be very obvious. That's your adventure hook right there. Shit, these dudes are doing this town dirty. We need to take care of this. If you want to be a little bit more nuanced of it, present the Red Brands as the guards and make the party take the next step to find out if they're good guards or bad guards. The hook is still there. How covered in bait it is, how obvious the hook is at that point is more up to you. You can manage the presentation of the hook to lead your party further into investigations, or directly just, be really obvious about it and let them throw down right at the top. Up to you. That's the adventure hook for the Red Brands. Cragmaw Castle is the later part of it. Now, this is where managing a plot becomes a challenge. This becomes an if-then. If the party rescued Sildar from the Kragmaw caves early on, Sildar will provide the next couple steps. My brother Grundrin has disappeared. He's been looking for the Wave Echo Caverns. We're not sure where they go. Oh no, what do we do? So the main plot is just handed to your players. The big, huge adventure hook, if they took care of rescuing the dwarf back from the Kragmaws, is handed to them on a silver platter. If they didn't rescue the dwarf, then you need to be a little bit more creative. And thankfully, the book helps you here. It says Quilleen Alderleaf, Sildar Howlwinter, and Halia Thornton. If they didn't get Sildar, they still have Halia and Quilleen, which are residents of the town that can provide the next step to find out about the castle. Okay. I do appreciate this for new players. This really should be a standard for most books moving forward. Unfortunately, I think Ghosts of Saltmarsh and Waterdeep Dragon Heist do the best job about presenting the non-player characters you're going to have early, giving you information about them and how they're involved in the plot from the start of the game to the end of the game. So that's one thing right here. You look at each of these things. We're going to zoom in a wee bit. And we're going to take it a step further while I have this list up. How do we use these guys for hooks? Some of this is already here. Toblin Stonehill, the innkeeper. Obviously, he could just be the mouth of the South. The friendly bartender. Rumor has it there's orcs putting up camps over at Wyvern Tor. I don't know if they have anything to do with the Kragmaws, but no one likes having that many orcs near town. 2 weeks ago, this strange mage came through asking about the ruined town of Coneyberry. No one's been up there for a while, but he seemed interested in some artifact. These things, if you've read the module and you want to seed those, you can use Toblin to put out the rumor, the hook for all of the outlying adventures, if you want to keep it simple. Elmer Barthen will be the second stop for the party when they get to town because he has to pay them for the wagon. Assuming you use the Meet Me in Phandalin hook, which was presented at the start of the book, or if you made up your own. This is one of the trading posts in town. So anything that's economically driven, banditry, too much taxation, missing shipments, any of those little type of things that you want, Elmar becomes the output for that adventure hook. Lenine Greywind runs another trading post. She wants to hire a party to go pick up stuff. So if you need to send your party directly to a location, you have her. I will pay you to go here and get X. Simple hook. Quilleen Alderleaf is a information type thing, not necessarily a quest person, but an informative or let me rephrase that. A quest giver in the instance that she can provide information. She's not going to say, "Greetings, adventurers, go here and do this for me." If the party approaches her, you as the dungeon master can use her to provide information for your party as they go forward. And obviously, Harbin Wester, the town master, he does have a quest. So when you get in, this is important information for new player characters. New dungeon masters. Don't worry about impressing your players with your thespian stills or lack ofs. That means don't try to be Shakespearean about everything. If you're not comfortable with voices, don't try to do voices. If you do fun, silly voices that are entertaining and engage your characters, then by all means do that. Get inside the NPC's minds. Make sure, and I want to use the NPC section here for a section because the majority of times your hooks are going to be given out by non-player characters or driven by non-player characters. So people matter. The player characters aren't the only people in the world. If we're being honest, most of the time we're spending in D&D, the player characters are fixing other people's problems. So invest some time in those other people, do what you need to do. If you're playing live, go ahead and lean in and get the physical, make your overdo the facial expressions or set your posture slightly. If you can, if you can do voices, good on you. Sometimes it can just be simply enunciating words differently. The noble of the town. If you have a native accent, for example, I'm a good old boy. I'm a good old Southern boy. right? So when I'm doing voices, if I'm talking like I'm Barton the farmer, I get kind of really down and low into my deep drawl, and even though I ain't doing voices, I'm kind of sliding into this. But however, when I'm speaking as one of the lords of Waterdeep in the open circle, I'm certainly not going to fall into any sort of dastardly country accent or slur my words or speak in any sort of untoward way. I didn't change my voice, it just simply changed enunciation and pronunciation. So all you got to do, make sure your players understand when they're talking to two different NPCs in the same room. Keep the game moving, which means let the players steer the interactions. This is a good thing, getting away from the two-page monologues of the old days. Back in original D&D, back in the old days, we'll just call it that. Your adventure hook consisted of 3 pages that the dungeon master would read out loud to the players, and then they went to work. So current modern D&D is a little bit more interactive. So what that's saying is let the players prompt it. Not every NPC needs to walk up to the character and give them their life story. If your players are not familiar with or engaged or involved enough with the town, or if gasp, they're hostile, there should be no effort made by these townspeople to ask the party for help. If the parties come in and burn down the local church, the first thing they did, then the party's the bad guys. You're not obligated as a DM anymore to give them any of this information from a quote-unquote friendly town. Okay. We're going to skip over the next thing. Town descriptions, red band, ruffians, all of that. That was kind of given out, again, a map. Look at last episode if you're concerned with using maps, learning how to use the maps versus the map keys in this. Don't want to spend any time on that right now. But so through the interaction with the town, I think I hit on that early, where we laid out the red brands as the bad guys. One of the first things that the party can do to endear the town of Phandelver to them is chase the red brands out. Over the course of their conversation with multiple non-player characters, and then you have this rumor chart right here that will help you as well, provides you as the dungeon master a little bit more content to customize the hook for your party. That's really what it comes down to. Building a hook is making sure that you're able to present the next quest idea in a way that it appeals to the party, or present the next clues for the quest in a way where your party gets to discover that hook and make it their own. Either way, it's basically the same thing. Gotta stress, I know I've said this before, I really gotta stress to you guys though, if you're a brand new dungeon master, you don't need a hook. Just the joy of playing D&D is enough. Day one, if you're sitting down with you guys, why are we doing? We want to practice. We want to play. We want to have some fun. You know, what's the point of the adventure? To roll some dice and kill some monsters. At least for now, until we get used to the game. Once you've gotten control of the game, once you've had 2 or 3 short adventure practice sessions or whatever, then hooks are going to start mattering. Because now we've learned how to play D&D. What's next? Now we're going to progress into a long-term campaign story. Short adventure, long adventure, doesn't matter. If it's going to take more than 1 or 2 sessions, yes, you need to start worrying about plot and hook and things like that, okay? So part 3 is the spider webs. In this part of the adventure, the characters follow up on existing leads and lines of inquiry. At this point, you have provided as much information as you can for them in Phandelver, and they need to move out. So this section, this chapter, contains the outlying, let me flip over to a different one. I think it'll be more helpful if I go dual screen at this time. Sorry. Let me get to my map. Some of their stuff is great. Some of it is not very intuitively built as far as 5e goes. It is what it is. So I'm going to go left panel here, and I'm going to stretch this sucker over to right panel here. I said right panel, didn't I? You don't want to go right panel. There we go. Okay. So real quick, what I wanted to do is kind of show you that when you get to chapter 3 in Lost Mines, the spider's web, okay, each of these locations, Tribor Trail, Coneyberry, Agatha's Lair, Old Owl Well, Ruins of Thunder Tree, Wyvern Tor, Cragmaw Castle. Each of these is listed out here. You see the little X's everywhere? These are telling you where the next few encounters are. So, to keep it all in context, the first hook was, let's just play D&D. Okay, we've learned D&D. Let's play an actual adventure. Fine, let's do Lost Mines of Phandelver. How do we get my party started? You guys are in Neverwinter. You need to take a wagon to the south. However you got to Neverwinter is up to your party. That's what backstory is for. You're not responsible for putting your party in Neverwinter. That's your party's work. Your hook is not there to start the adventure. Excuse me. You shouldn't necessarily need a hook for the adventure to form. That's not your job. That's not my job as a dungeon master. The party has to do a little bit of work and have their own hooks for why they're together. Okay? You'll drive yourself crazy trying to manage that relationship. Your party needs to take ownership of that for themselves, right? So, we're looking at the map on the left, going from Neverwinter to Phandelver, okay? Cragmaw Hideout right there at the interchange. That was the chapter 1 where the Goblin Ambush and all of that went. So when they got to Phandelver, like we were talking about a second ago, let me go back a chapter, even though we have the map open. Each of the non-player characters that we talked about was able to provide some information. Everything that's in chapter 3, you need to know for chapter 2. Read the book in advance. This is prepping. This is where prep and hooks come together. If you as a dungeon master are not aware of what's going on around Phandelver before your party gets to Phandelver, and we'll ignore the module. If you are not aware of what's going on in the region around your town, around your starting hub when you start, there's no way that you can properly plant breadcrumbs, hooks, clues, and any of that for your party to follow up on. So be aware. Do the reading in advance. Find the things that look fun from chapter 3. Does your party have to do all of them? No. You can make them do all of them. That's up to you. That becomes a little bit more adventure design. We'll talk about that in a separate thing. How much is enough for a party? Completely different thing. But for you as a dungeon master, you've read through these. You said, oh, Thunder Tree sounds fun. That's a cool map. We'll try that one. I don't really want to do Agatha's Lair because there's no map for that in the old well. There's nothing for that, so I don't think I'll do that. Wyvern Tor, there's no map. Maybe I don't do that. Cragmaw, there's a cool crap. So, however you're deciding which one of these to use, remember that they all exist within the game world to begin with. You're a dungeon master. You can exclude the ones that you don't want to be there for sure. But this is where the sandbox feel of Lost Mines kicks in. There is one big specific plot point to find Gundren and find the map into Wave Echo Caverns. That's the big thing. All of the things they're doing away from Phandelver are to support that. Finding Gundren, finding a map, finding someone that knows all of this. So you have a couple choices there. You can use some misdirection in your chapter 2 statements and have all of the little ones out here possibly connected with clues to that, or you can just let your party find their own fun. That's up to you. But hooks for chapter 3, for the most part, have been put out in chapter 2. For the most part. I'm going to do one little thing and make it and show you otherwise. Coneyberry Agatha's Lair. Okay. The idea behind Agatha, spoiler, is she's a banshee. The priestess in the town of Phandelver needs to get something from her. Your party can go interact with this banshee, either fighting her or dealing with her to get this product. As they go through Coneyberry, the old owl well, they'll run into a Zentarum with a bunch of Harum Kost, an evil mage, is it not Zentarum, a red wizard of Thay, who's doing some research here. You don't have to have any mention of this guy whatsoever. Your party can literally run into him. Walk straight into him and holy crap, the presence of a dude with 12 zombies is enough of a hook to get your party interested. Now, what you do with that non-planted hook, I'm going to use that term, that's just an obvious adventure standing there. You didn't have to do any scheming, you didn't have to do any plotting for your party to encounter this. This is an encounter-driven adventure now. Think of it as an encounter-driven hook. They ran into the encounter. Why is it there? That's the second part. Nice and simple. He wants the orcs at Wyvern Tor removed. You do me a solid and do this. I'll do you guys a solid. He wants to go talk to Agatha. This red wizard has his own motivation for being there, which is listed there. You as a dungeon master need to figure out how to present that. That can be, some examples, dialogue checks, persuasion, intimidation, simple discussions, killing all the zombies and holding a knife to his throat. However your party approaches that, he has a couple of pieces of information, a couple of things that either they want, they need, or he wants and he needs. That's where an encounter hook comes in. Knowing what this guy is doing, why is this non-player character here, what are their goals, and how do I make their goals either become the party's goals or become something that the party wants to stop. Okay, that's adventure hooking, that's plotting. So I mean, honestly, we've been kind of going for about 30 minutes here talking about it, and I'm hoping that you guys are starting to realize that most of the time adventure hooks are just natural progressions. We spend a lot of effort talking about them. We spend a lot of time talking about them because they are important. But if you are reading the adventure from beginning to end, if you're understanding the process of how does this adventure start, what goes on in the middle of the adventure, and where does this adventure end, and how do those three sections tie together, you don't have to come up with your own adventure hooks. You don't have to do, it's all there for you. It's all listed in the book. Adventure hook equals plot. Okay? Plot doesn't always advance your adventure hook because you don't necessarily want to tell your players the plot. Use the adventure hooks to tie them into the plots, big plots, side plots, main quest, side quest, whatever your term is. That's all a hook is. How do I get my party involved in the quest, the adventure, the exploration, the murder, the mystery, whatever. Okay? So yeah, we don't need to spend a whole hell of a lot of time talking on it. The only time that adventure hooks are difficult is when you're not prepared. Straight up. When you're not sure what's going on in the world that you're playing in, you're not sure what the town that you're about to walk into is, and you're not sure what you have planned for your party later today. You're not even playing a campaign. I'm just shooting off of my hip. Hooks become very important and very difficult at that point because basically what you're doing is you're throwing ideas out. That is literally fishing. I don't know what we're doing. I don't know where this campaign's going, so I'm just going to keep throwing shit in the water until they bite, and then I'll build an adventure around that. That's acceptable for an experienced dungeon master. Absolutely. When you've hit the point where you've got a bunch of stuff memorized and you're able to do that, then please feel free to do that. This series isn't for those people. This series is for new dungeon masters. So if you don't know your region, if you don't know the adventure setting, if you don't know the main plot, then you have to make a living on hooks, and you have to force the hook into becoming the adventure, if that makes sense. A well-written adventure, a well-fleshed out world is going to provide enough hooks, enough content for adventure, enough things for your players to show inquisition into to where they find their own hooks rather than having to drag through it. Think about it that way. The more prepared you are, the more prepared and knowledgeable you are for the adventure or the region that you're about to dungeon master, the easier it is to set up plot points and hooks for your party to follow along with. The more lived in your world is, the more established and engaging your world is, the more likely your players are going to they're going to hook themselves. You're not even going to have to do anything. Interactions with the environment, interactions with the population, natural interactions will directly play into the story that you've written or the story that you're using, provided you've prepared accordingly. Preparing accordingly isn't memorization. It can be, if you're good at memorizing, by all means. It can be a spreadsheet. List of non-player characters, where are they located, what do they want? Simply going down that spreadsheet as your players fall encounter non-player characters. Oh, this guy's with the red brands. I can use them. You know, the red brands ain't as bad as the rest of the town folks say. They talk about them like they're a bunch of criminals, but in reality, they're the ones keeping the goblins from coming to bay. Maybe you should go talk to our boss up at the old house. Boom, done. Hook right there. As long as you know who the person is, where they are, or where they would be wandering, and what the major important thing is for that non-player character, you're able to quickly generate a hook from that. So, just an example, and it was given in the book right here, this nice little table here, the important NPCs. Throw those suckers on a list. Where do they run, and what are they interested in according to the module? And that's all you need, and you can kind of role play from there, driving non-player characters. Locations, no different. Why is this location on the map? What's it look like? What do the party see from outside? Was it an ambush raid? Sometimes as simple as you guys are, been cruising up the Tribor Trail to the northeast for about 3 hours now. You've made it about, well, I guess what we do 3 miles, about 10 miles to the northeast, off to the south of the road, near the foothills of the Star Metal Hills. There's a bunch of scrub. There's a bunch of brush. But you notice near a large cluster of trees, there's a large group of birds circling above. Crows and vultures and other carrion birds just kind of circling above and slowly swooping down. That's an adventure hook. The players will either say, yeah, something died over there, screw that, and they miss that hook, or odds are it's like, ooh, loot, let's go check it out. So that's a location-based adventure hook. We're not talking a person is saying, oh, help me, adventurer. Please get MacGuffin A from location B so Princess C can find their way to the Star Realm. That's a non-player character hook, and honestly, that's a heavy-handed example. Location hook. What does the party see that intrigues them to come there? As they approach Coneyberry, the old burned-down, ruined town, maybe 2 or 3 buildings standing, another 10 or 12 buildings down to their foundation, weeds and stuff growing up. But you see a big column of fire rising up. As you get closer to the sound, notice a pretty large campfire, a nice tent of unusual design, and 12 figures slowly milling about, moving rocks. Now, what the hell is that? That's an adventure hook, guys. Remember, everything that you can present to your party to get them intrigued, by definition, is a hook. I think we're going to go ahead and close the video up here. I think a couple more statements. I think one of the big concerns and misconceptions for new dungeon masters is the idea that you have to have a engaging plot with 2 or 3 twists and a backstab and a betrayal, and you have to be able to use that as your hook. No. The definition of an adventure hook is, what can I use to get my party interested in going from point A to point B? That is it in a nutshell. Whether it's a cloud of carrion birds circling a body in the woods, whether it's a warm, cozy campfire off on the side of a ridge in the middle of the rainstorm, whether it's a cute barmaid batting her eyes at the players and we're looking at the bartender worriedly at the same time. We're trying to use moments and pieces in the environment to engage our players, whether it's location-based, whether it's history-based, I didn't even talk about history, or whether it's NPC-driven, non-player character-driven. Real quick, history hooks are your big ones, 150 years ago, ABC happened, and now we fear the cult of the dragon is coming back again. In 1374, the dragon cult was rife along the Sword Coast as they tried to convince dragons to join the undead teams and begin the rise of the Dracolish. Now, 100 years later, we fear that the cult has renewed itself, but they're going for live dragons instead. That's a history hook, Big plot hook. So, to close out the video here, first and foremost, thank you guys for your time. Appreciate you. Hopefully you hung out. Hopefully I've taken a little bit out of the fear and the sting out of adventure hooks. Understanding your book, understanding your module will provide you as the dungeon master more than enough information to see the area with hooks. Hooks are not just dialogue driven as far as help me Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. They can be environmentally driven, seeing something or smelling something, hearing something. They can be rumor driven if they, hearing rumblings in the bar. If you really need to, you can straight up, if as a new dungeon master, if you're kind of struggling, you can go with the help wanted board, the job board, the big plywood board in front of the town hall that says help needed, orcs at Wyvern Tor, goblins at ABC, zombies at DEF. If you need to do that for yourself early on, that's just a simple way to do it. Hooks are there to get our parties interested in going somewhere. How you present them, what you use for them is going to vary based on your first and foremost, your experience, your preparation, and what your focus is for that adventure. The more experienced you are, the easier you'll be able to seed hooks in there without your party knowing. That's something that will only come with practice. Practice. Repetition will help you do that. Second thing that will reinforce that, and probably more than the first thing, is preparation. knowing the region, knowing the area, knowing the adventure, knowing the beginning, knowing the end, and knowing how you're supposed to use the middle to connect them will provide you with the information you need to create hooks. So at the end of the day, there's no magical formula. You might be disappointed as we get to the end of the video to hear DMGeezerjim say, preparation is the key. Reading is the key. If you read, take notes, and understand your module, you will have no problem whatsoever generating adventure hooks. Okay. So that's that for this time. We're going to go ahead and close up this session here, or this episode. Thank you so much for following. Hopefully you're enjoying yourself. Adventure hooks are not scary. They're certainly a necessary thing, but they will become as natural as anything else for you once you get used to developing a process of preparation and knowledge of the areas. You know, that's really it. Knowing what your party's about, knowing what the area is about, and knowing how to tie the two in. That's adventure. That's hooking. That's using adventure hooks to get something moving forward. And I promise you, they're nowhere near as hard as some media would let you would let you think. Most of them are already in the books that you're going to be using. Most of them are natural progressions of the game, just given a fancy name. But hey, guys, thank you. Good luck. We'll be back for another episode soon. Thank you for joining me for basics to the basic of dungeon mastering and all that kind of stuff. Prep episode. Y'all be safe.